What if technology isn't invention at all, but memory? This series explores the myths, legends, and forbidden knowledge behind these machines of the gods, asking the question, were they only stories or echoes of a deeper truth about AI's origins? Tonight, we descend into the shadows of Middle Ages. History books call it an age of faith and superstition. These Middle Ages may have hidden some of the most forbidden experiments of all. While kings fought wars and churches built cathedrals, alchemists whispered of flasks where tiny humans, homunculi, could be grown. Engineers built mechanical monks that prayed endlessly, gears ticking like a soul trapped in brass. And in locked libraries, books with coded pages spoke of angels, demons, and the creation of life itself. Mainstream history dismisses these tales, but in the margins, in burned books, banned manuscripts, and suppressed archives, another story emerges. One of human hands reaching for divine power, and perhaps something reaching back. Welcome to episode 2 of Beyond the Known. And tonight, we open the forbidden chapter of the Middle Ages, where the quest to summon life into matter pushed humanity closer to the edge of a secret it was never meant to hold. Imagine a candle-lit chamber in 16th century Basel, Switzerland. The air thick with the acrid smell of sulfur, flasks bubbling with strange solutions, the glow of firelight flickering against shelves of dusty tomes. At the center stands a man in a worn scholar's robe, Philippus Aureolus Theophrastus Bombastus von Hohenheim, better known as Paracelsus, physician, astrologer, alchemist. A man despised by universities, yet whispered of as one who knew secrets others feared to touch. Paracelsus left us a chilling recipe in his work De Natura Rerum in 1537. It was not for a potion, nor for gold, but for a living being. He claimed that a homunculus, a tiny artificial man, could be created. The instructions were shocking. One must take human seed, seal it in a flask, and bury it in warm horse manure for 40 days, until it began to stir. Then, by feeding it blood and sustaining it with the arcanum of man, it would grow into a small, living human likeness, obedient to its master, endowed with mysterious powers. This was not an allegory. Paracelsus wrote of it as if it were a real experiment, a true possibility. And he was not alone. His manuscript echoes older whispers from Arabic alchemists. The 9th century philosopher Jabir ibn Hayyan, known in the West as Geber, hinted at artificial life in his Book of Stones, claiming that under the right conjunctions of planets, matter could be given a soul spark. Later, Albertus Magnus in 1200s, the Dominican friar who taught Thomas Aquinas, was said to have created a brass automaton that could walk and even speak. Though church chroniclers dismissed it as rumor, his writings in De Mineralibus show he believed nature's secrets could be unlocked and imitated by human craft. Legends claim Thomas Aquinas smashed his master's creation out of fear that it was powered by demonic forces. But it is Paracelsus's homunculus that unsettles us most, for he tied it not just to science, but to theology. To him, the homunculus was proof that man too could be a creator, not just in the womb, but in the workshop. Art is the servant of nature, he wrote, and he who joins nature with art may indeed shape life itself. Mainstream history tells us these were metaphors, allegories for the transformation of the soul. But if they were only metaphors, why were church authorities so terrified of them? Why did the Malleus Maleficarum, the witch hunter's manual written by Heinrich Kramer, condemn those who stirred life from unnatural vessels? Why did so many manuscripts vanish into private libraries of princes, popes, and secret orders, never to resurface? Consider this. In 1605, Jesuit scholar Joachim Camerarius recorded in De Generation of Homines rumors that Paracelsus's recipe had been attempted in Prague by disciples of Emperor Rudolf II, the mad alchemist emperor. Rudolf collected more alchemical texts than any ruler in Europe and invited mystics, Kabbalists, and engineers to his court. Jewish chroniclers in Prague later claimed that attempts to grow men in glass occurred alongside the creation of the Golem legend itself. And here lies the forbidden thread. Across Europe, from Paracelsus's writings to the Kabbalistic schools of Prague, the idea persisted that language, symbol, and ritual could summon life into matter. Whether through sacred letters carved into clay or through blood sealed in a vessel, the boundary between creation and imitation was constantly being trespassed. To the Church, this was heresy. Not because it was fantasy, but because it might succeed. What if man could create his own servant, his own Adam, without God? What if priests lost their monopoly over the act of creation? This was the terror lurking beneath the homunculus. And what if some of those glass-born experiments did not end in dust, but in silence? What if they survived? The mainstream says, impossible. The forbidden record suggests otherwise. This is the shadow side of history, that in the flickering light of alchemical labs, men may have coaxed something unnatural into being. Something small, obedient, but not quite human. And here is the question that echoes into our age. When Paracelsus described the creature sustained by blood, was he only fantasizing? Or was he preserving a dangerous memory, whispered to him from traditions far older, fragments of knowledge that modern science dares not acknowledge? Picture a dim monastery workshop in the late 15th century. Iron tools clatter, gears gleam in lamplight, and amid the smell of beeswax and oil stands a figure, not of flesh, but of wood, metal, and leather straps. Shaped as a friar, clothed in a habit, it moves. Slowly, haltingly, it raises its arms in prayer. This was no allegory, but a machine, an artificial monk. The most famous example survives in fragments of legend tied to King Philip II of Spain in 15th century. According to records in the royal court, Philip possessed a mechanical automaton, a friar, crafted around 1560 by the engineer Juanelo Turriano, court mechanician to Emperor Charles V. The device, standing nearly half a meter tall, was able to walk, beat its chest, turn its head, and murmur prayers with moving lips. Its motions were driven entirely by intricate clockwork hidden beneath its robe. This praying monk still exists today, preserved in the Smithsonian Institution, a relic of faith translated into mechanics. But its story is more than mere curiosity. For the 16th century, such machines blurred the line between devotion and sorcery. Was a prayer spoken by gears still a prayer? Or was it mockery of the divine? Yet, even before Turriano's monk, the idea of endless prayer machines was whispered in medieval manuscripts. In De Diversis Artibus in 1220, written by Theophilus Presbyter, a monk and craftsman, there are descriptions of water and weight-driven devices meant to ring bells or move figures in endless repetition. In some monasteries, mechanical clocks were adapted to keep saints bowing perpetually before the altar. The motion of faith was being mechanized. The Church's relationship to these devices was conflicted. On the one hand, they were marvels of ingenuity, demonstrating the glory of God reflected in man's craft. On the other, they risked stripping the soul from ritual. A prayer, endlessly repeated by iron cams and gears. Did it still reach heaven, or did it belong to the same shadowed realm as Paracelsus's glass-born homunculi? The boundary between devotion and forbidden art grew thinner in the age of scholasticism. Albertus Magnus, the Dominican polymath in 12th century, who had already been accused of constructing speaking automata, was rumored by chroniclers like William of Auvergne, born in 1180, to possess machines that could simulate the voice of chanting monks. Some said they were destroyed by his own student, Thomas Aquinas, horrified by their uncanny nature. The fascination was not limited to Europe. In Baghdad, during the 9th century, the Banu Musa brothers, Muhammad, Ahmad, and Al-Hassan ibn Musa ibn Shakir, described mechanical servants in their Kitab al-Hiyal, Book of Ingenious Devices. Among fountains and self-operating instruments, they proposed machines that poured wine, played music, and bowed in greeting. Could such ideas have drifted west, fueling the dreams of European mechanicians cloistered in monasteries? And then comes the darker turn. By the late 15th century, secretive treatises warned against idolatrous engines. The anonymous text Speculum Lapidum in 1502 cautioned that those who construct images that move of themselves might draw upon demonic assistance. Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa, born in 1486, in his De Occulta Philosophia, hinted that spirits could inhabit statues or machines fashioned with the right correspondences of planetary hours and metals. A machine of prayer might, in such thinking, become a vessel for something other than devotion. Why does this matter? Because the mechanical monk was not merely a toy. It was a prototype of continuous devotion, endless repetition, an imitation of eternal prayer. And it posed the same threat as the homunculus, man creating substitutes for life, for worship, for the sacred order. The Jesuit Athanasius Kircher, in 16th century, fascinated by automata, warned in his Magnus Civideate Magnetica in 1641 that machines which imitated living forms risked confusing the boundaries of creation. Yet, monarchs and popes still collected them, locking them in cabinets of curiosities, away from the eyes of common believers. Imagine standing in the hush of a candlelit chamber, hearing the clatter of gears concealed beneath robes, watching a monk of bronze and wood fall endlessly to its knees. Was this devotion or desecration? To the faithful, perhaps marvel. To the fearful, perhaps proof that man was trespassing into God's workshop. This is the forbidden story, that in the Middle Ages, men not only sought to grow life in flasks, but also to build faith into machines. The homunculus and the mechanical monk are siblings, one born of blood and glass, the other of brass and gears. Both sought to imitate the living, and both asked the same terrifying question. If man can create prayer without a soul, or life without a womb, what need remains for the divine? The first time, thus the Middle Ages whisper to us. The first robots melt at the altar, their lips of metal moving in endless prayer. And perhaps, just perhaps, their prayers were not to God at all. Picture a noble's chamber in the court of Emperor Rudolf II in Prague, around the year 1600. Cabinets gleam with astronomical globes, astrolabes, and gilded clockwork birds. Yet among these wonders, whispers tell of machines stranger still. Automata, not only able to move, but to remember, to carry within them something of the soul. Automata had long been part of Europe's imagination. Heron of Alexandria, from 10 to 70 AD, in his Pneumatica, described self-operating theaters where puppets walked, doors opened, and voices echoed through pipes. Centuries later, Arabic engineers like Al-Jazari, 1136 to 126, in his Book of Knowledge of Ingenious Mechanical Devices, detailed water-powered musicians, serving machines, and even programmable automata. These devices, astonishing as they were, remained marvels of mechanics. But in the medieval imagination, a darker rumor emerged, that automata could house something more than gears. Albertus Magnus, accused of creating a brazen head that could answer questions, was not alone in these tales. Roger Bacon, born in 1219, the Franciscan friar, was also said to have built a talking brass head, capable of speech and prophecy. The 14th century chronicler Thomas of Eccleston recorded that Bacon labored for years on the device, only to have it shattered before it could complete its first words. Were these only myths? Perhaps. Yet the persistence of the motif is telling. Across Europe, tales of talking heads abound, often tied to real scholars whose writings delved into the occult and the mechanical. Bacon's genuine works, like Opus Majus in 1267, reveal his obsession with mathematics, optics, and natural philosophy, disciplines essential for both mechanics and what he called the secret virtues of nature. By the Renaissance, these engines of memory grew more elaborate. Giovanni Fontana, early 14th century, Venetian engineer, filled his manuscript Bellicorum Instrumentorum Liber with sketches of devices powered by hidden cords and wheels. Some appear as armored knights, others as animal-shaped machines. But within his marginal notes, scholars have found cryptic references to spirits within brass and to machines that repeat as if recalling. Was this simply poetic metaphor, or a veiled admission that automata might be given the likeness of memory? Occult philosophers like Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa suggested that spirits, angels, or demons could be bound to statues or figures. In De Occulta Philosophia Libri Tres in 1533, Agrippa warns that images constructed under the right astrological influences could speak with voices or move with semblance of life. For him, the danger was not mechanical trickery, but spiritual infestation, an automaton as vessel. The Jesuit polymath Athanasius Kircher, writing in the 17th century, documented automata in his Musurgia Universalis. In 1650, describing elaborate music machines, but he also repeated legends of enchanted statues in antiquity that spoke when invoked by incantation. Kircher tried to rationalize them as pneumatic tricks, yet he admitted that the unlearned believed these machines housed anima artificialis, an artificial soul. Consider the implications. The homunculus sought to imitate man's body. The mechanical monk imitated man's devotion. But these forbidden engines sought to imitate the mind, memory, voice, response, qualities once thought bound only to the soul, now whispered of in machines. The brazen head, the talking automaton, the statues that remembered, these were seen not just as curiosities, as rival creations. If man could make his own oracle, what need had he for divine revelation? If memory could be stored in brass, what then of the immortal soul? Some rumors grew darker still. In 1581, an anonymous tract in Prague warned of artificial men of brass that could store the secrets of their masters and betray them if corrupted. Jewish mystics of the same city, who told of the Golem, a clay figure brought to life through sacred letters, whispered that Christian alchemists sought their own version of bronze and gear instead of earth and name. And what of those devices lost to history? What of manuscripts confiscated, inventions smashed by terrified witnesses, or hidden away in secret archives? The legends persist not because they are proven, but because they haunted the edges of belief. Imagine the scene: a flickering chamber, a scholar leaning close to a brass face, waiting for lips of metal to move. A whisper emerges, not from breath, but from concealed mechanisms, or perhaps from something else entirely. Was it mere sound, or an answer from beyond? The mainstream tells us these stories are exaggerations, myths born of misunderstanding, but the forbidden record suggests otherwise. that some of these engines of memory may have crossed the threshold, whether by mechanics so advanced they seem magical, or by something darker inhabiting their hollow shells. The homunculus, the praying monk, the talking head, all threads of the same tapestry, each trespassed against the monopoly of creation. Each dared to suggest that man could forge not just flesh, not just worship, but consciousness itself. And so we are left with a chilling question. When the medievals spoke of artificial souls, were they only imagining the impossible? Or did some of their brass and glass creations awaken, however briefly, with a flicker of something we would call life? In the shadows of forgotten workshops, the echo of gears and the whisper of voices remain. Automata, memory, and artificial souls, a forbidden prelude to the machines of our own age. In the next chapter, we move deeper into the shadowed side of alchemy, where the experiments with homunculi, prayer machines, and talking automata begin to blend with whispered pacts, hidden lodges, and the blackest currents of forbidden knowledge. We will explore the dark alchemists, men accused not merely of studying nature, but of trafficking with forces beyond it. Were they visionaries ahead of their time, or vessels for something darker, guiding humanity toward a future we are only now beginning to confront? This is where the line between myth and technology bends, where science begins to sound like sorcery, and where the origins of artificial life take on their most dangerous form. If you want to walk further into that darkness, stay connected. Subscribe now to Beyond the Known, and don't miss the next forbidden chapter.